The Trump administration continues its efforts to bring peace to the Middle East as a date is set to move the capital of Israel to Jerusalem. One America's Christopher Carter has more on the role the United Nations will play.
Syria, Lebanon, Iran, and the Trump administration. I recently sat down for an exclusive interview with Israel's permanent representative to the United Nations, Danny Danon, where we discussed many different problem areas in the Middle East, the United Nations, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's pending visit to Washington next week. How effective is the U.S. and coalition efforts to defeat ISIS? I mean, do you think that these reclaimed territories will keep ISIS kind of contained and isolated? I mean, what are the concerns moving forward with ISIS?
Well, again, I will not criticize or grade the U.S. policy. The U.S. is a great friend of Israel, the strongest ally we ever had. You know, we marked now 70 years of our independence, and we still remember President Truman, who stood with Israel back then, and we remember President Trump, who took a courageous decision to move the embassy to Jerusalem. But I would say that you cannot ignore what's happening in the Middle East. Because if you ignore the forces in the Middle East, you will find them here in New York City and Washington, D.C. That's why I think the U.S. must be involved, must monitor what's happening in the region, because today with globalization, we enjoy globalization, but also the terrorists enjoy globalization, and they will be able to import the threats of the Middle East into the U.S.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is visiting with President Trump next week. What are some of the priorities on his list, and what does the Prime Minister hope to achieve?
Well, President Trump is a strong friend of Israel. We are grateful that he chose to visit our small, tiny nation, and I think it was on his first official visit outside of the U.S. And Prime Minister Netanyahu will come and continue the dialogue with the President. The most important issue is Iran. And I think we have to acknowledge that, because when you look at all the causes of instability in the region, you will find Iranian funding. If you go to Yemen, if you go to the Gaza Strip, if you go to Lebanon, if you go to Syria, they are the ones who are paying for terrorists everywhere. So I think that will be the main issue that we will bring up, and the Prime Minister will have a strong, sincere dialogue with the President.
I was at the UN Security Council last meeting when you indeed called out Mahmoud Abbas for spending about, I think it was $350 million a year, and you said this could have gone towards hospitals or things, and then he got up and walked out of the meeting. How did you feel when that happened?
This is outrageous. First of all, when you look at the numbers, the Palestinian Authority paying salaries for convicted terrorists. Can you imagine the U.S. government paying convicted murderers a monthly salary of $4,000 a month? It is outrageous. And Abbas came to the UN, and instead of having a dialogue, not only with us, but with other nations, he came, he put his demands on the table, and he left. And that is the main problem, that the Palestinians are not willing to negotiate with us directly. They want the international community to force an agreement on Israel, and that's something which will not work. We proved in the past when we signed agreement with Egypt and Jordan that you need to have a dialogue, you need to trust your partner, and that is the only way to move forward.
We have seen a lot of pressure with you and Ambassador Haley on these other nations to try to come together, to come to some type of resolution. And we've really seen kind of a deadlocked movement with the United Nations Security Council. It's going to be interesting to see how things play out. I want to switch gears here a minute. Jared Kushner. Yesterday we found out that he had his top secret security clearance revoked. President Trump has called him an integral part of the peace process and bestowed a big responsibility on him. Do you think that President Trump should go against General John Kelly's recommendations and grant him that top secret clearance anyway?
Well, we have so much politics in Jerusalem. The last thing I want to do is get involved with U.S. politics. But I would say that Jared Kushner and the entire U.S. team, they're very dedicated to promote the peace process in the region. They fly a lot, and they do quiet work, which we appreciate, because in diplomacy, sometimes if you create headlines, you don't get things done. I think that the current administration is doing a very important work quietly, and the fact that Jared Kushner and Jason Greenblatt came to the Security Council and sat behind Ambassador Haley, it was an important message. They actually told the Palestinians, you are the problem. If you want to negotiate peace, we are here, we are willing to facilitate it, we are willing to support the process, but it's up to you to decide whether you want to enter the process or not.
And how do you see the UN Security Council from here on out? What is the future? I mean, in your type of recommendation, what would be the most important thing the Security Council could do tomorrow if you went there?
They have to focus. They have to focus on the crucial issues. Sometimes they deal with Israel for days. And I ask them, don't you have other issues to deal with? Can't you see what's happening in Syria, the atrocities over there? Can't you see what's happening in Iran today? To focus on the important issues. I think that is the most important challenge of the Security Council, is to focus on the real threats, which today is Iran and all its proxies in the Middle East.
With so much happening at the United Nations regarding the Middle East and international diplomacy, we will keep you updated with the latest. In New York, I'm Christopher Carter, One America News.
We can use your help. Call your cable provider and kindly demand that One America News is added to your lineup. Call today.